Sometimes, the world does not announce its intention to destroy you. It does not arrive with drawn swords or thunderous declarations. Instead, it arrives with a whisper. First, it asks you to lower your voice. Then, it asks you to fold your arms. Then, it asks you to forget who you are entirely, piece by piece, until the space you occupy is nothing more than a shadow of the person you were meant to be. This is a story that reveals a devastating reality. When fear forces you to chip away at your own soul, your identity vanishes before your life does. We often believe that staying quiet to keep the peace is a strategy for survival. We tell ourselves that if we just adjust a little more, we will be safe. But this safety is an illusion, and the cost of the ticket is your very essence. This story is not about a bird. It is about the human spirit, the boundaries of self-respect, the paralyzing grip of fear, and the ultimate courage required to remain fiercely yourself when the world demands your submission. High in the craggy, wind-swept peaks of the sun-forged mountains, there lived a magnificent creature known as a Crimson Falcon. His name was Ignis, though he knew no names, only the language of the howling wind and the endless blue sky. His feathers were the color of a dying ember, flashing brilliantly against the clouds, and his wingspan was a masterpiece of nature's engineering. Every morning, as the first rays of the sun pierced the horizon, Ignis would take flight. He would soar to the highest thermal currents and let out a piercing, glorious screech, a declaration of life, of freedom, and of his undeniable place in the world. One day, a wealthy and powerful man named Lord Malachar journeyed into the mountains. Malachar was a man who possessed everything but appreciated nothing. He saw the world not as a tapestry to be admired, but as a collection of objects to be owned, subdued, and controlled. When he saw Ignis diving through the morning mist, a bitter seed of envy took root in his chest. He could not fly. He could not scream with such unfiltered joy. And so, he decided he must own the creature that could. Through cunning traps and relentless patience, Malachar's men captured the great bird, dragging him from the boundless sky down into the stone-walled valleys of men. Ignis was brought to Malachar's grand, sprawling estate and placed on a silver perch in the center of a manicured courtyard. His leg was bound by a heavy chain of cold iron. Despite his captivity, the falcon's spirit remained unbroken in those early days. He was still a creature of the wild. And so, the very next morning, before the estate had even stirred, Ignis felt the ancient pull of the dawn. He puffed his chest, opened his beak, and let out his magnificent, echoing screech. It rattled the stained glass windows and woke every servant and soldier in the keep. Lord Malachar lay in his silk-sheeted bed, his jaw clenched in profound irritation. The people of the estate began to whisper. Some complained about the noise, while others secretly marveled at the sheer power of the wild thing trapped in their midst. But for Malachar, the cry was a personal insult. It was a reminder that he had caged the bird's body, but not its soul. A dark thought began to bloom in the Lord's mind. I do not want this defiant creature in my home anymore. I want it gone. I want it destroyed. But there was a complication. In Malachar's society, there were strict laws regarding the treatment of royal beasts, and the Crimson Falcon was protected by ancient decrees. Killing such a rare, valuable creature without a just cause would make Malachar look impulsive, foolish, and cruel to his peers. He needed an excuse. He needed the bird to commit a crime, to break a rule, to justify its own execution. He needed to wash his hands of the guilt. The next morning, Malachar walked out to the courtyard, his boots clicking sharply against the cobblestones. He stood before the chained falcon, his eyes cold and devoid of empathy. Listen to me, beast, Malachar hissed, leaning in close. From tomorrow onward, you will not screech in the morning. Your voice shatters the peace of my estate. You disrupt my sleep and anger my household. If you open your beak and make even the slightest sound tomorrow, I will have my guards separate your head from your body. Ignis did not understand the words, but he understood the malice. He felt the heavy, suffocating aura of death radiating from the man. The screech was his nature. It was how he breathed, it was how he existed. But the primal fear of death is a heavy chain of its own, far stronger than the iron around his leg. The next morning, the horizon began to bleed with the colors of dawn. The air grew crisp, and the deep, instinctual urge rose in the falcon's chest. His lungs expanded. The sound clawed at his throat, desperate to be released into the sky. But Ignis remembered the cold eyes of the Lord and the sharp glint of the guard's steel. His body trembled. He clamped his beak shut so tightly that his jaw ached. He swallowed the cry. It felt as though he were swallowing a stone, a jagged piece of his own spirit that tore at his insides as it went down. He remained entirely silent. To cope with the overwhelming energy of the morning, Ignis simply shifted his weight and half opened his magnificent crimson wings, letting the morning breeze ripple through his feathers. It was a small comfort, a tiny expression of the wildness inside him. Hidden in the shadows of a grand balcony, Lord Malachar watched. His hands gripped the stone railing in frustration. His plan had failed. The beast had complied. There was no defiance, and therefore, no excuse for the executioner's blade. The fact that the bird had bent to his will did not satisfy him, it only made him angrier. He realized that it wasn't the noise he hated, it was the bird's very existence, its lingering beauty, its quiet grace. Furious, Malachar stormed down into the courtyard. He pointed a trembling, rage-filled finger at the bewildered falcon. "You think you are clever?" he shouted, his voice echoing off the stone walls. "I saw you! I saw you spreading those wretched wings. From tomorrow onward you will not move your wings. You will keep them tightly folded against your sides. If I see a single feather catch the wind, if I see you stretch or flutter, you will be dead before the sun reaches its peak." The third morning arrived, casting long, mocking shadows across the courtyard. Ignis did not screech. He remained perfectly silent. The wind picked up, swirling through the courtyard, teasing his primary feathers, begging him to open his wings and catch the updraft. A falcon's wings are not just limbs, they are its purpose. To keep them closed when the wind calls is an agonizing contradiction of nature. Every muscle in his back twitched. The instinct to stretch, to balance himself, to prepare for a flight he would never take, was maddening. But the fear of the blade was a cold, heavy blanket over his instincts. He clamped his wings to his sides, tucking them so tightly that his muscles cramped and burned with the effort. He did not flutter. He did not stretch. He simply stood there, stiff and unnatural. Yet, as he stood frozen, a small field mouse scurried across the far side of the courtyard. Without thinking, Ignis's head snapped toward the movement. His neck stretched forward, his golden eyes locking onto the prey. He couldn't fly to catch it, but the predatory focus, the sharp, sudden movement of his head, was as natural to him as a heartbeat. He tracked the mouse until it disappeared into a crack in the stone. Lord Malachar, who had been watching from his study, slammed his fists onto his oak desk. The sheer audacity of the bird to still possess the instincts of a hunter, to still look upon the world with sharp, assessing eyes, drove him to madness. He marched down to the courtyard, his face flushed with tyrannical rage. "Enough!" he roared. "You mock me with your defiance. From tomorrow, your head shall not move. You will not look left, you will not look right, and you certainly will not stretch your neck to look at the sky or the ground. You will stare straight ahead, perfectly still, like a gargoyle of stone. If you twitch even a fraction of an inch, I will end your miserable life." The fourth morning was a portrait of tragedy. Ignis sat on his silver perch, surrounded by the opulent beauty of the estate, entirely broken. He made no sound. His beak was tightly shut. He made no movement. His wings were locked against his body, stiff and aching. He did not look at the sky. His neck was rigid, his golden eyes staring blankly at the cold, gray stone of the wall directly in front of him. He felt a crushing weight pressing down on his chest, heavier than the iron, heavier than the stone walls. It was the weight of his vanishing self. He was alive, yes. His heart pumped blood, his lungs drew in air, but he was no longer a crimson falcon. He was a hollow shell, an ornament, a silent, unmoving shadow stripped of everything that made him real. He had surrendered his voice, his freedom, and his vision, all to appease a man who despised him. But even this total surrender was not enough. Because when a tyrant, whether it is a cruel lord, an abusive partner, a toxic friend, or an oppressive society, wants to destroy you, they do not need a logical reason. They will invent one. Submission does not cure a tyrant's malice, it only fuels their contempt. That afternoon, Malachar walked out to the courtyard one last time. His eyes were cold, calculated, and devoid of any humanity. He looked at the perfectly still, perfectly silent bird. He smiled a wicked, cruel smile. "Listen carefully," Malachar whispered, his voice dripping with venom. "Tomorrow morning, when the sun rises, you will spin a web of silk from your beak, just as a spider does. You will weave a tapestry for me. If you do not, I will snap your neck with my own bare hands." Ignis froze. Though he could not comprehend the exact nature of the words, the tone was unmistakable. The demand was unnatural. It was a bridge to nowhere. He was a creature of the sky, a creature of bone and feather and fire. He could not do what was being asked of him, and for the first time, he understood the entirety of his situation. A single, profound tear formed in the falcon's piercing golden eye and rolled down his feathered cheek. His body trembled, not just with fear, but with a deep, crushing sorrow. Seeing the bird tremble and weep, Lord Malachar let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "What is the matter, beast? Are you crying? Are you finally terrified of the death that awaits you tomorrow?" In the quiet sanctuary of his own mind, the falcon whispered to the universe. "I am not weeping because I fear the darkness of death, cruel master. I am weeping because I see now what I have done to myself. I tried everything to please you. I tried to survive by hiding who I was. My voice was my soul, and I swallowed it for you. My wings were my freedom, and I bound them for you. My vision was my truth, and I blinded myself for you. And what did it earn me? Nothing but an impossible demand and a quiet execution." The falcon's heart beat with a new, tragic clarity. "Today, I have learned the cruelest lesson of the world. When someone has already decided that you have no right to exist as you are, bowing down will never save you. Appeasement is a lie. I should have died on that very first morning, screaming my song into the rising sun. If I had, my body would have perished, but my identity, my spirit, would have remained untouchable." The next morning, the guards gathered in the courtyard. Lord Malachar stood at the front, a smug grin on his face, ready to execute the impossible judgment. But as the first ray of the sun breached the walls, Ignis did not remain still. He did not keep his wings bound. He did not stay silent. With a sudden, violent burst of energy, the falcon threw his head back. He snapped his wings open to their absolute, breathtaking maximum, creating a gust of wind that kicked up dust across the stones. And from the very depths of his soul, he unleashed a screech so loud, so defiant, and so magnificent that it seemed to shatter the very air around them. It was a cry of pure, unadulterated identity. They killed him, of course. But as he fell, he was no longer a broken shadow. He was Ignis, the Crimson Falcon of the sun-forged mountains, whole and unapologetic.